Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar on transforming finance. I'm Chetan Hans, and I'm a partner in Grant Thornton, Singapore. And I have with me Gangesh, who will be taking you through this. So for today, we will have the sessions broken down into a couple of sections. So we have uh, essentially the first session, which is where Gangesh will take us through some thoughts around the finance transformation, how it's affecting us in today's day and age, and the uh, essentially the digitalization of finance function. Then we will also have a guest speaker with whom we can share experiences on how they underwent their transformation journey, and what were the key triggers for that, what was the key learnings and challenges for them. And at the end, we'll have a technology partner, Jedox, who would then present how their tool can help with some of these digitization aspects in the transformation. Please note that this webinar Please note that this webinar is only is as a guide, and if you want further professional advice, we encourage you to consult with your advisors on specific aspects. And this webinar is going to be recorded. A couple of housekeeping functions. For Q&A, please use the Q&A function to ask questions. Any additional information will be shared through links via the chat. And the recording for these slides will be available after the session. So you'll probably have to wait for a day or two, and we'll share the slides and the recordings of this session. So with this, maybe I'll probably pass over to my colleague Gangesh. So Gangesh, over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on finance transformation. Today, we will be exploring the key technology trends, what are the driving forces behind the finance transformation, and what are the best practices to help you build a future-proof finance function. As you are aware that today's CFOs are under increasing pressure of providing the real-time insights and how they are able to provide the real-time insights and how finance transformation can actually help them. We are going to explore that. So first, let's look at the changing landscape of finance. Basically, there are key drivers behind which are impacting the current landscape of finance. And the first one is the rising stakeholder expectations. As you know, these days, the boards, the investors, and other senior management leaders, they expect real-time financial insights and financial data from the CFOs. And this is becoming increasingly complex for CFOs to provide all this real-time insight. And based on a survey from Gartner recently, 70% of the CFOs are experiencing increasing pressure from the key stakeholders to provide the real-time insight. And the second key driver is the technological disruption. The automation, AI, and cloud computing, these are impacting the finance in a big way, how the finance operates. These technological disruptions are actually, changing the way the finance operates. Then we have the regulatory complexity as the third key driver. So the more complex regulatory environment means that, we need to have a more robust process in place for meeting those compliance requirements. And as you may have noted, that because of the recent changes in the regulatory environment, the finance teams are experiencing much more significant pressure on their workload and how they have to deliver their work. An example would be implementing the SOX compliance or the GDPR compliance regulatory requirements. Finance teams are working quite late, and they are finding it very difficult to meet their regulatory reporting requirements. The next factor is the evolving role of a CFO. As most of you would agree that CFOs are no more a number cruncher. They are the strategic advisor to the CEO and a business partner. So how this is going to take place, we are going to explore, in the next few slides. The next factor which is impacting the landscape of the finance is the increased emphasis on sustainability and ESG. A study from McKinsey suggests that 80% of the investors believe that sustainability considerations are going to impact the long-term value proposition for the finance. And last, the talent shortage and the skills gap. A recent PwC study actually suggested that there is a significant gap between the skills that the finance teams possess and the skills which are required by the employers in the current landscape. But in a nutshell, basically the role of a CFO is evolving very fast. It's no longer a number cruncher. So the current CFOs need to be very agile. They should be able to leverage the technology and they should be able to drive the growth for the business and make the strategic decision for the finance as well as the business. Okay. So now let's look at a poll question. Which of the following is not a key driver of finance transformation? The first choice is rising stakeholder expectations for real-time data and insights. Second one is technological disruption like automation and AI. The next one is increased focus on the cost reduction. And lastly, growing demand for hard skills like accounting and financial modeling. So the poll is going to end in the next 5 seconds. So I think majority of you have got the answer right. So it's the last option, which is the growing demand for hard skills like accounting and the financial reporting. So 54% of you have actually answered it correctly. And the remaining 3 factors are actually the key drivers of finance transformation. So let's move on. So now let's look at what are the key drivers of finance transformation. The first one is the cost optimization. Just imagine that your finance team is spending a lot of time in doing the manual processes, doing the accounting, doing the number crunching and so on. Whereas you can actually automate some of the routine tasks using the RPA. Things like the invoice processing or the data entry or the bank reconciliations can actually be automated using the RPA. The second driver is the enhanced decision making. Just imagine that you have a dashboard which provides you with a real-time insight into your financial performance of the company. So by leveraging the data analytics, business intelligence tools, you can gain a deeper understanding and insight to make a data-driven decision. For example, you can analyze your sales data and you can identify your top-selling product, or you can use the analytics tool to predict your future revenue. So this is the power of using the analytics, data analytics, and business intelligence tools. The third one is the improved agility and flexibility. If you remember, when the pandemic hit, a lot of companies were struggling to manage their financial reporting, but the companies which could react swiftly to that change, or companies which switched to the cloud computing financial reporting system or the cloud-based ERP systems, they managed the change very well. So they could manage the challenge very well. So the agility and flexibility is the key to survival in today's dynamic world. The next one is the risk management. These days, financial risk is actually a significant threat to the business. So companies need to have the right risk management strategy in place. So companies may use certain cybersecurity measures like enhanced password security measures, or having some regular security updates and so on, which are critical for the business. And lastly, the talent development. These days, the role of finance is evolving, so we need to catch up with the skills required to perform certain tasks in today's world. So companies need to upskill and right skill the finance teams. They need to provide them with the training on the latest technologies to be able to be relevant and up to date. Now let's look at some of the cost optimization strategies. In the past, I think some of the optimization strategies may have worked, like cutting the manpower cost and so on, but these are not the sustainable solution for the long term. So in order for building the future-proof finance in order to be sustainable, companies need to follow this three-pronged strategy. The first one is to focus on the automation. So companies need to adopt technologies like RPA and so on to handle the repetitive tasks so that the resources can be freed up to focus on more strategic initiatives or more strategic tasks. They can also use the automation to do the financial reporting and budgeting processes. The next one is optimizing the cloud usage. So just imagine cloud resources as your utility bill. The company should pay for what you are actually utilizing. In some companies, there may be like 100 licenses taken, but in reality, company may actually be using like 30 to 40 licenses. So you need to really look at your cloud usage and make it the right size. And at the same time, it always becomes helpful, when you go back and negotiate with your cloud provider to sort of bring down the cost drastically. And lastly, rethink the vendor management. So the third strategy is on around the vendor management. So you need to evaluate the existing vendor contract and see if there are any potential opportunities for any cost savings and so on. In my previous company, we had approximately 100 contracts with the IT services provider. We had different contracts under the IT services. So we actually went through the whole list and we identified which tools were critical for the survival of the business, which tools were essential for the growth of the business. And then we sort of tried to cut down on those tools which were good to have, but not essential for the business. So this helped us save around 30% of the cost. And the company should also consider outsourcing some of the non-core finance activities, some routine activities like bookkeeping or reconciliation or financial statements preparation to the outsourced service provider. And this actually helps finance team to focus more on the core processes and more strategic items. Now look at the technology trends which are transforming the finance. The first one is the cloud computing. And cloud computing enables scalability, accessibility, and real-time data. For example, if the companies are using a cloud-based system and company may be operating from multiple geographical locations, and it's very easy to collaborate even from different geographical locations. And we have seen a very classic example that when during the pandemic hit, that everybody was working remotely offsite and cloud computing could actually make it happen very easily. The second is artificial intelligence, which can automate tasks or it can identify patterns and data. A lot of banks are using the AI to predict any fraud before it even happens. The next one is on the blockchain, which provides a secure and transparent way to record and track the financial transactions. And again, a lot of financial institutions are using the blockchain technology to support the trade finance transactions. And lastly, big data and analytics, which enables decision making through advanced reporting, forecasting, and performance analysis. Now let's see how we can actually build a future-proof finance function. So in order for us to build a future-proof finance function, we have to follow a step-by-step approach. The first step is to embrace a strategic mindset. First of all, we need to consider finance as a business partner and not as a service provider. And we need to align our financial goals with the overall business strategy. And the second step would involve develop a data-driven culture. Data is the superpower these days. And we need to empower our teams to leverage data analytics for problem solving and decision making. Because if we are basing our decisions without analyzing the data properly, we're not going to have a meaningful decision. The third one is to invest in talent development. These days, a lot of technologies are out there currently available in the market. But what technology we need to use, how we can actually upskill our teams that they are trained to use those technologies, because technology alone is not going to help unless our people are rightfully trained to use those technologies. So upskilling your team in the new technologies, data analysis, and business partnering skills. So some of these skills are very essential to build a future-proof finance function. And lastly, we have to promote a continuous improvement. So we can't be complacent. So we need to, drive a culture of innovation and continuous improvement within the finance team. Now let's have a look at how the future of finance actually is looking. Number one is the embedded finance. Just imagine that you are booking a ride and at the same time you are able to buy the insurance, or maybe you are buying, a new outfit and you get an option at buy now, pay later at the checkout option. So that's the power of embedded finance. So we bring the financial services to the places where we are already spending a lot of time. The second one is the decentralized finance. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with the banks and the financial institutions, but now the decentralized finance is actually shaking things up by removing the middleman. So now peer-to-peer platforms are making lending and borrowing, with each other possible using the blockchain technology. And decentralized exchange like Uniswap, they are making the cryptocurrency trading very easy. The next one is the ESG integration. So now companies are not focusing so much on how to make money, but they are actually integrating a lot of environmental, social, and governance factors into the financial decision making. So a lot of investors would want to invest in those companies, which have the high priority around the ESG considerations, like invest impacting, which are good for the planet and which has the good social impact. So that's where the investments are going. The next one is AI and machine learning. So we need to leverage AI for personalized advice, fraud detection, and risk management. Just imagine that you have a robot giving you a tailored investment advice. So that's the power of AI. And lastly, the CBDCs, which is basically, it's just like a cash. It's like a digital currency issued by the governments, and it's making the payment process much faster, much more efficient than ever before. Now, we know that finance transformation has its own benefit, but at the same time, we also face a lot of challenges. And the biggest challenge is around accepting the change. So how do we actually overcome that? So we need to have a clear change management strategy in place. It's like, a roadmap to the final goal. How do we reach the end goal? So in this, we can actually have a 4-step approach. The first step is to define the vision and the goals. So we need to clearly articulate what is the desired future state of finance function, how the finance function will actually look like, incorporating all the best practices and be able to support the business. The second step is develop a communication plan. So we have to engage all the stakeholders. We have to keep everybody in the loop throughout the process so that all the stakeholders know what is happening and how we are going to achieve that. The third step is to identify and manage the resistance. Whenever there is a change, there is a significant resistance. So we need to anticipate potential challenges in advance, and we have to develop a strategy to address those potential challenges, how we can overcome, whether our teams require additional trainings down the line, or our teams need to know, is there a process change that need to be managed, or, what are the other impacts that needs to be addressed and how we can address. So all these factors need to be identified upfront, and we have to have a strategy to address those changes in advance. And lastly, we have to build a strong change management team. So we need to have a champion who can actually drive this change. And one person who is, appointed as a champion can actually provide the support to the finance team in handling this change. Now let's look at a use case, how automation can actually help. Although automation and finance transformation can help in many, many ways, but, something which is very close to my heart, based on my previous experience also, is around the FP&A, especially around budgeting, forecasting, and financial planning, and so on. So as we are all aware that, there are significant challenges in the traditional FP&A. First of all, it's very time consuming to collate all the data from different sources, then to consolidate, because the data may not be streamlined, may not be homogeneous, and there are multiple sources of data. So this is a huge challenge that most of the companies face in their FP&A process. Then there is a limited real-time financial visibility, because systems are sometimes offline, or sometimes systems don't talk to each other, and there are practical challenges getting the real-time financial visibility on the data. And the next challenge is inconsistent budgeting and forecasting processes. So if there are multiple departments within the organization, or if there are multiple entities within a group, sometimes there may be disparate systems or inconsistent approach in how the different divisions or different entities are doing the forecasting. So these are the real challenges. So why should we actually automate the FP&A process? First of all, of course, is the increased efficiency, because we can automate the repetitive tasks like the data entry and reporting. Then we can also get the real-time insights, because if the systems are interacting with each other, and if they are on a cloud-based platform, it's easier to get the real-time insight into the data, and we can visualize the data, and we can see the analytics and so on. And lastly, the improved accuracy, because if we reduce the manual intervention and automate the processes, it definitely helps us improve the accuracy. And how Jedox FP&A system can actually help in automation, because Jedox basically is an integrated planning platform which basically unifies the budgeting, forecasting, and reporting process. And Jedox also uses the AI driven forecasting, which leverages AI to enhance the prediction accuracy and so on. So the planning and forecasting becomes much easier. And it's a very collaborative tool, whereby multiple stakeholders across departments, across multiple legal entities can actually collaborate in the real time to do the financial planning analysis and the budgeting exercise. So that brings an end to my presentation, and I will pass back to Chetan. Chetan, over to you.
Thanks, Mangesh. Thanks for sharing the insights. So next we have Jason Ang. So Jason, maybe I'll pass over to you for a quick introduction, and then we can go from there.
Thanks, Chetan. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm invited by Chetan for this session. I'm actually currently with Singapore Post, driving and leading the finance transformation efforts over the last year or so. Obviously also had a bit of war stories and experience with other organizations as well. And I suppose that's why Chetan has invited me to share some of these perspectives and inputs with the group of you. Happy to take questions. Yeah, Chetan.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, and I'm sure your experiences will be really helpful for the audience. So, given your experience in your current and previous roles of the finance transformation, I think the first thing what I would probably like to ask is, what were the main points or the key problem statements that triggered the need for finance transformation? So, in various roles that you've been, what were the top triggers that you noticed that encouraged organizations to undertake such an exercise?
Yeah, so I suppose I want to preface everything that I'm saying. Comments are, I suppose, not purely from my current role within the organization, but really garnered through the experiences of leading initiatives over the last couple of years operating this space, right? I think a lot of people dialing in today also have got various initiatives that they have got in their organization, thinking of or in full flight or wrapping up, right? But I think the couple of conditions and trigger points that I suppose that we can talk about, maybe we wrap it around a couple of key themes, right? Around people and culture, right? What we are saying is, obviously from my experience, is that a lot of the organizations that I've seen, most of the teams are long tenured. Teams are actually functioning well, right? They're doing a good job, but a large part of their time is actually spent undertaking transactional processing tasks. Sometimes work involving reconciling data between systems, data manipulation, even downloading reports from systems to send to another party. Right? This is all fine and good, right? But it takes attention away from the rest of business, indirectly creating silos. And you've heard Gangesh earlier saying that there is a huge appetite for finance to do more, right? Changing landscape, CFOs, finance teams are expected to do a lot more, right? And having so much attention spent on clearly the transactional processing tasks, you just can't do those, right?
Yeah.
Add to that, right? A lot of the finance teams as well are seeing peaks, workloads around month-end close, right? There again, taking time away from organization, right? So that culturally as well, right? Organizations, you hear a lot about, hey, this is just legacy. This is the way that we've done in the past. Right? Don't fix what is not broken, right? Clearly, again, far from the culture of continuous improvement that Gangesh was talking about earlier. From a process angle, so we talk about people, we talk about culture. From the process angle, right? A lot of organizations that are, I suppose, necessitating transformation are the ones where processes are highly manual, Excel-based, right? A lot of offline processes. One of the big topics that I'm seeing a lot is around an area that I'm seeing a lot of attention is around procure to pay process, right? A process that is often dealt with as a first area by many organizations. What happens is that sometimes payments are not going through the purchase requisition route. Maybe you have a paper approval form that needs to get signed offline, goes to finance to input into the system for approval, right? So a lot of online, offline sort of toggle in terms of processes, a lot of manual processes as well. And then lastly, technology-wise, right? Many organizations, and obviously the experience that I had is that the technology is largely on-premise. Sometimes a system that is coming to end of life. A significant amount of customization as well. And sometimes you see that this technology is not fully owned by IT. Business has got no part in it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so just recap: people, culture, processes, technology, necessitating transformation.
Yeah. So Jason, we just got a message that your screen's not visible. So can you
Oh,
just check?
I'm actually on, to be honest. It's black.
Is
No?
there a cover on your?
No, there isn't. There isn't.
Okay. So okay, no problem. So so I think of the things that you've picked up, people, process, technology. I probably want to pick up on the technology piece next. So as you mentioned, there are legacy systems, and sometimes IT is not in charge. And then you're moving from a new system to a new system. That itself is a journey. So in your experience, what are the key factors that have gone into evaluating, tech solutions for, something like a procure to pay, which you mentioned is probably one of the first things that companies try to digitize and transform.
Mm-hmm.
So any thoughts that you may want to share around the tech aspect of the things?
Well, I suppose I want to say that don't spend. It doesn't make good financial sense to spend money on the technology if your finance team and the broader organization cannot then use that technology, right? So the prerequisite is that there is an appetite all the way from the leadership all the way down to the teams, right? And sometimes it's about important to get back to the basics, trying to understand the processes, the people, the cultural issues, right? Before we spend money on technology. And I think Gangesh mentioned about technology being not the end solution, right? It's purely an enabler, right? So what I have typically, and the teams that I've worked with have typically done is start by identifying the problem that we are trying to solve, right? So one thing we can look at is start to map out your current process maps, talk through it with your team, because then that would then surface all the gaps and inefficiencies that are residing in there, right?
Yeah.
And then you then build up a business requirement list with the involvement clearly of the business and end users, right? And clearly there's a lot of requirements, right? So identifying then what is a must-have, a could-have, and a good-to-have.
Yep.
So one of the things that we have clearly looked at for procure to pay was we want to eliminate manual inputting of invoices by finance after the rest of organization have filled up a paper form. And we want to do it once and do it good. So we ended up looking for a solution that does that. And thereafter, what you can do is share this list with vendors, right? Vendors that you have shortlisted, get them to do a proof of concept or demonstration, clearly mapping, then getting them to then map that they have satisfied those requirements that you have done in the back end. And clearly, one of the things that we have looked at and tried to steer clear of is to not go the path of customization as well. So with all the technologies we're undertaking, looking at taking on leading practices that are embedded within the cloud solution. And clearly then also review the system implementation partners that you want to work with for the system that you have selected, preferably with a party that has got proven track record. And not just looking at the competence at the technical level, but also from a functional perspective as well. And it would be good if you can find a team that can then make the connections between these two.
Yep.
Certainly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's good. That's really helpful, Jason. So and building upon the other elements of the aspects that you highlighted on people and processes, and which you also mentioned in your comments during the technology. So technology is only as good as processes. So what I hear from you is, in order to get the whole thing right, we really need to focus on culture and processes. So maybe if you would like to share your experiences, or rather challenges with these two aspects, on change management, and what were some of the things that you have experienced on overcoming these challenges, getting, whether it's getting buy-in from the top, or convincing the users, because the CEO and the C-suite may have a certain vision, but if the users acceptance is low, then the whole project will fail in the long run. So maybe some thoughts around challenges around culture and obviously processes, because if
Sure.
this is a good time for organizations to look at the processes and really see what's required, what's not required, and maybe use best practices embedded in the system.
Yep. So I'm I'll count myself pretty lucky that I've got the backing of the C-suite, right? Obviously, in certain instances, I was actually hired with a specific mandate, so that's a good thing. But ultimately, one of the key challenge that I faced, and I currently still face, is employee resistance, right?
Yep.
It is very easy for the business and end users to see only the loss of not having what they're used to doing, right? It's very difficult, and it's not natural for humans to want to see the positives and what they have gained, right? I think that's loss aversion. And people are also not fearful of change. In fact, if it's a positive change, you see that people actually want to embrace it. What they are against is being forced against their will to adopt new technology, and also the uncertainty of change. So the way around it is really to constant communication and engagement of the key end users and the rest of the business, getting them involved right from the start. In fact, right from business requirement development, getting them involved and getting their voice heard in process workshops, getting them obviously involved in user acceptance testing prior to system go live. That's important, right? So I'm saying that if you engage people and make them feel like they are part and co-creating that change, then that's a lesser of a struggle, right?
Yep.
And then clearly in large transformation program that can drag on a couple of years, benefits do come slowly, and employees who would need to have got great stamina and great motivation, right? So I think it's important along the way to have milestones to celebrate the small wins that come, right? Getting them engaged and getting them to celebrate is important. And I suppose one of the most important point is, I'm sure a lot of people who have dialed in is struggling, right? And potentially will struggle, is something that's very clearly operational and tactical. And that's really taking time off from your business as usual work. How do we carve out time to start to do some of this transformation, right? So I think really operationally wise, just a smart scheduling of your tech implementation, where planning your user participation, times when your users are a bit more free and getting them to participate, then is important. Clearly avoiding periods. and really having a lot of hands-on experience and having their participation in off-peak times. That's important as well. Yeah,
Right.
Chetan.
So thanks, Jason. So I think so far we have focused on challenges and struggles. So maybe I want to look at the other aspect as well, the positive aspects, and some of the key takeaways or key learnings that you take from an exercise like this. Maybe if you want to share with the audience, it's see the idea is anything like everything is a risk and an opportunity. Similarly, a transformation project is not just additional work, but it also should lead to something positive. So maybe if you can share in your experience, maybe two or three key takeaways or key experiences from such projects that you've been, I think that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. So I think basically there's never a good time to undergo transformation because every day you have things to do. Every day there is a new task, a new project, right? How do you fit this in, right? And the word transformation does sound daunting to most. But but efforts can be right sized for every organization, big or small, in terms of size and budget, right? So there's never a good time to undergo transformation. I think we need to take the first step. Before you take the first step, obviously adequate preparation work is important, right? I talk about defining the problem clearly, getting an understanding of the existing processes and bottlenecks, but obviously clearly not spending too much time sucked into it, right? You want to get into outcome focused discussion. You don't want to be sucked into the problem, but you need to have a good understanding of the problems that you're trying to solve. I also mentioned earlier about projects being and technology being business led as well, rather than IT led, right? If business is not going to be involved, then the outcome is not going to be something that they will enjoy as well, right? So getting the process owners to own the development, getting them to co-create, getting them involved in all the processes during the journey is important. And in fact, selecting a champion amongst them as well. And the learning as well is that your transformation program is only as good as your weakest part. So I talk about the pillars of people, processes, and technology, right? So case in point, right? If you have got an entire tech stack, right? Your weakest part would be your operations system, perhaps that doesn't track items that you sell, and it's not working properly. So that's your weakest part. Or it could be a weakest part around people, right? That you're not prepared them well. So getting that ready as well as part of a change management process is very important.
Yep.
And then obviously communicate and over communicate the why, the what, and the how to all levels of the organization and tailoring that to the audience. But I think the outcome, the price at the end of this journey and this effort is good, right? Because Gangesh has mentioned that increasingly people are expecting finance to play a bigger role, having a seat on the table, right? No longer just being counters and custodians of money, but being able to be helping to provide inputs to strategy, things like that, right? So I think it's definitely worth pursuing. I suppose people who are dialing in and thinking and toying of the idea of embarking on one.
Yep.
Chetan.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I think a couple of messages that I hear from you. Obviously,
Okay.
the three pillars: people, process, and tech stack. So I think equally important, and I think underpinning all these three is communication, rather over communication, if I may say. Have people buy in from not just the senior leadership, but have the users also committed to the project. Have their so that they have a say in the project and their requirements are met. A good time for companies to probably reassess their processes and see how they need to evolve and align to the tech stack that they want to go ahead with. And yeah, to both you and Gangesh's point, I think finance definitely has evolved from being a custodian to being a strategic business partner. And I think given how the way overall corporate reporting is shaping up, it's not just financial reporting anymore. There'll be non-financial metrics that will become increasingly important part of the annual report. So if we want to focus on generating meaningful annual reports for the stakeholders, I think it's important to have some element of transformation in the business. So I guess with that, maybe I'll open the floor for questions for Jason and Gangesh. So yeah, any questions if there's for them on the transformation aspect?
Apologies for black screen. I don't seem to be able to get it.
So I guess we probably don't have any questions for now. So maybe we'll move on to the next section. Jason, thanks a lot for your time, and we're really happy and honored to have you here and sharing your experiences. Thank you very much. So maybe CS, I request you to share the screen and take the audience through your bit.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chetan, and thank you, Jason. Thanks for sharing that as well. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your time. My name is CS, or Chun Siong for short. I lead the business for Jedox, and like you probably seen earlier from Gange's presentation, we help organizations, or our tool help organizations in their planning, forecasting, and reporting platform. I come from a quick introduction. I come from a consulting background. I spent about 10 years in Accenture, built my own consulting firm when I was advising various clients, big and small. When you guys are looking at, obviously financial transformation, that's a part around your whole procure to pay process, your order to cash, eventually your record to report. But a lot of times, organization, I see a lot of the planning, budgeting scenario, bottoms up and whatnot, are a lot done in Excel or in a very manual way, or on a very high level, but not so much in the deep down level. So I'm here to share a little bit more around what Jedox, us as a team, look at when you look at finance transformation into the future and strategically, right? How can Jedox be your digital twin, right? So there's a lot of AI and tech and whatnot, but how does a tool like us can be your digital partner or business partner as you continue to grow, right? So let me share my screen quickly. You should be able to see my screen now. Yeah. Okay. Let me know if you cannot. Yeah. Okay. So when Bark is an independent kind of analyst in globally, and when they looked at and asked for us performance management users across the globe, right? So it means finance, business, whether you track P&L, budget versus actuals, or you're tracking like sales performance or whatnot. What are the common challenges that teams are facing, right? So majority are saying, hey, like Jason mentioned, a lot of them are a lot of the organizations are spending a lot of manual effort, and it's because there's a lack of automation. So a lot of times you're downloading data from your systems, you're trying to do VLOOKUP, all this data will just repeat on a monthly basis, or quarterly basis, or half yearly basis. So it means you can't really kind of do this performance management as often as you want. Now, what it means by that is also because these data are quite siloed and separated. Your data coming from HR, your data coming from sales, from your ERP, for example, are quite inconsistent, right? So when you make a decision around sales, what does it mean to your finance, P&L, top and bottom level, for example? So the inconsistency of data and the struggles around that is quite real. It's kind of what most organizations and users are responding to. And with that, it also means that when you do a performance planning, or you do a scenario, right? For example, coming to 2025, you want to model different scenarios in your business, right? Whether you open a new factory, open a new store, you cut headcount by 20% and whatnot, right? The integrated planning across, HR, sales, finance, production, for example, these are all quite silo at this point. And again, how do you actually make it a little bit more automated? When you make a decision, it kind of rolls up to a scenario and the impact on the top and bottom line, right? And lastly, in Singapore, in the region, resources are getting more and more expensive. When people leave, we all know that the cost of replacing is very high, both from the cost of resource, but also upscaling. So how do you actually mitigate some of this risk around resources, right? The predictability around those, right? So Jedox, we feel like there's a need to bridge the digital twin, especially with the advent of AI, right? And what does digital twin really mean is we want you, organizations, whether it's government or commercial or whatnot, or the manufacturing or banking or whatnot, to be able to model every part of your business in Jedox, right? Your product, your SKU, your business lines, your customers, your production line, if you're in real estate, all your buildings and your units, for example, so that when you have when you look at your business performance, you can go down to all, not just on P&L and finance level, but all the way down to the skills and your business and your people level, right? And that helps you to not just look backwards on your performance last 3 months or last 6 months, but also run scenarios in the future. What if, I do this, do that? What if I collapse a certain business together? What if I introduce a skill to replace a new skill? And this is the pricing moving forward into Chinese New Year and this, December, right? So how do you make this? And this is kind of where we're coming in from, right? So we cover a range of topics, right, across planning, budgeting, reporting, right? So these are the areas that we cover, and we help finance leaders like yourself, budget, plan, forecast, report, P&L, cash flow, balance sheet. These are standards we integrate with any data source that we're talking about, SAP, NetSuite, Zero, or all that. But I think that doesn't stop there, because you then, depending on your complexity of your business, you then need to do CapEx planning, for example, multi-year procurement plan, asset under construction, moving into development phase, for example, right? You may have OpEx that's running that you need to kind of model, whether it's people or OpEx cost of rental or whatnot, right? So all this modeling is required. Then as you get more and more mature, I mean, not mature, I mean, as long as you have more than one entity and your business is a bit more complex, you move into allocations where you need to allocate revenue, costs, leasing might be a challenge for you, for example. And then when you have multiple entities, a FinCom becomes another topic that likely you're doing Excel or somewhat part system, part Excel in a way, right? So we address these topics for our finance leaders, right? Taking away all this Excel and be able to have models and pre-built configurations that you can easily leverage on to sort of again save time, save effort, avoid challenges like Excel formulas pointing to the wrong cells and stuff like that, right? But I think where the tool and technology is also pushing finance team members into integrated financial planning, right? What is a scenario of yours where you then roll down to your HR team that they might want to plan 3-5% increment, bonus, collapse a function, merge a function and whatnot? What does it mean to you from a HR perspective? And HR might want to run a few scenarios and give it to finance. Then it goes down to project, S&OP, if you're in manufacturing, your supply chain, distribution, production, but what minimum stock you need to maintain, and how do you back calculate all that so that your factory or your supplier is giving you those numbers. And as you adjust that, it also impacts on the top line from an integration financial planning perspective, right? And then spreads into marketing, sales, and ESG, right? So at a core, Jedox, we've been in the market for over 20 years now. The Singapore office is about 10 years old at this point, and we have clients, Singapore Airlines Engineering Group, ST Engineering, EasyLink uses us to plan, and forecast their financial across the group. And it goes now all the way down to sales and IT and whatnot, right? So let me write it back. Yes, we have the operational ERP that you typically run in your business that gives you an insight of how you performed last year, last month, last quarter. But it's also important that your budgeting and planning and forecast is no longer a yearly cycle, right? So you need to kind of look at it, bring all the data together. Our tool can help you not just look backwards, but also kind of plan those scenarios into the future as well. Yeah, and it's important because every month, every quarter, everything's moving so fast, so you need to make those decisions. So what do we look like when it's turned on in your environment? So we have a platform. We do bring best practice accelerator, HR, sales, S&OP, ESG, and finance, where you can easily adopt some accelerators, move some of your Excel processes into Jedox. But we are also very configurable. So you can see everything is drag and drop, no code in Jedox. What it means is that it's faster to implement, lower risk, hopefully lower cost for you guys and save time, right? We also connect to any data source that you're talking about. Maybe you are running Oracle NetSuite, Zero, SAP, HANA, whatnot. For example, we have connectors that can bring those data. And we're quite practical. So we're a German company. One of the first things you want to solve is those manual effort you're spending in putting data together, right? So our integrator is within Jedox, so we can connect to any data source, bring that in, massage it. So you have a common chart of account, common skill, common business line that you have to manage both from budget versus actuals perspective, right? And then lastly, our UI UX is very clean and simple. You can do all chart-based, for example, but I think more practically, you probably want to see the numbers and whatnot, and expose it beyond just the finance team. So this goes into your C-level, a CEO, or your CEO or some of your business MDs, for example, may require reports, right? And then the team are still generating reports on a weekly or monthly basis, give it to them, right? All this can be self-served by those business leaders, right? Now all this is great because these are all kind of bringing everybody up to speed on not just financial planning, connected planning, but what does kind of technology around AI, and it's a big word, we like to boil it down to a very practical way on what does it mean to you. So on the left, we get the inspiration around from a self-driving car. I had the pleasure of driving a non-power steering car. If those who have, you know what it means. I can't really remember the days anymore, but cars have kind of moved from emergency braking, cruise control to now more and more self-driving and smarter. We take the inspiration for an EPM perspective. Like, what does it mean to you? So we're trying to move everyone from Excel-based planning reporting into more integration. So bring all these data together, workflow supported, so it drives workflow versus you have to chase budgets and numbers on emails and whatnot. We already have ability to kind of predict based on drivers. So for example, if your revenue top line is very much based on freight rates, for example, or based on interest rate, for example, or whatnot, we have that to be able to model and predict into the future based on a few drivers, for example. Then that is where kind of Jedox has launched this year on kind of AI and scenario planning, where you can actually build various scenarios, do what if scenario planning, and most importantly, being able to talk to Jedox around once your data is inside, right? So so there's a couple of things that kind of what I'm showing you here on the video. Right? One is obviously how to and asking questions to Jedox on how to use the platform. How do I create data? How do I create reports? How do I integrate jobs to Salesforce and whatnot? So these are all a lot of the knowledge base and how to is kind of all in Jedox. It helps you to adopt the platform easier. Now this is where it gets exciting, right? So you can build as many dashboards as you want, but more often than not, the dashboard kind of grants outdated after first or 2 months you use it. So what you want to do now is be able to ask any question to Jedox and just be able to build a report on the left for you, right? And this is already available in a lot of the platforms out there in the market. We feel like we're kind of bringing it into the finance teams where you can really ask and say, hey, compare this SKU or this business line Malaysia versus Vietnam this month versus last month, and give me a growth and then give me a report, for example, and suggestions around kind of what data you might want. It's not difficult to do. It's already in the platform, and we'd like to kind of continue to improve that, right? And then lastly, if you're running a very voluminous or very business with multiple branches and multiple data sources, right? We have a ChatGPT connector, right? We advise you to use ChatGPT Enterprise so that data sits within it and doesn't share out. In our next release, we're going to phase this out. We're going to use the Microsoft OpenAI so data doesn't become communicate with ChatGPT anymore, but giving you a summary of what your budget versus actuals is based on last month or last quarter, right? So then that doesn't mean that you take away your job, right? Because then it changes kind of your job to a bit more, or your analyst or your manager's job around, okay, this is what has happened, right? Let me talk to the business team, make a bit of decisions, kind of what if scenarios, kind of if I look into the next quarter or next month or whatsoever, right? So practically, it's kind of how we see AI and machine learning helping us as finance leaders and our clients and yourself as well, right? Being a practical way of being able to have drivers to predict our revenue and costs, being able to ask any question, right? So hopefully that's in a board meeting or in a meeting, you can ask some of these questions, data are served to you, you can make decisions versus waiting for analysts to go away and try to crunch a report in Excel and PDF, PowerPoint, give it to you. And then lastly, being able to automatically kind of summarize your business performance factually based on numbers. And then you partner with the business, spending more time instead of 80% preparing data and 20% analyzing your data, switch that around, maybe 20% looking at the numbers that's been prepared and then 20% sitting beside your business team to really think about strategies to change and stay ahead of your competition. Yeah. Releasing for this year for Jedox will allow you to kind of build budget and forecast numbers into the next quarter, or 3+9, 6+6, for example, being able to drag and drop any sorts of forecasting that you want, and that's something that we're releasing, I think, this month, if not next month. Yeah. So yeah. So I coming back to kind of digital business partner or digital twin, right? Kind of summarizing back to the problems that we talked about. Number one, a lot of people are spending a lot of manual effort, right? So how do we help is really having a connector and ETL process, extract, transform, load to connect to any data source, so we take away the manual effort of VLOOKUPs and Excel and CSV files and lookup across files and whatnot. So that's number one, how we're trying to solve this problem. Number two is around inconsistent data inventory as well as integrated planning process. So we allow you to model any parts of your business, be it finance, HR, sales, S&OP, buildings, production chain, distribution channels, for example, so that you can actually do various scenarios down at the entity level, on the business line level, right? You can actually play with various scenarios of that, and that kind of eventually rolls up to you from a overall finance, various strategic, best, worst case. If I do various initiatives, what does it mean to my business, right? And then lastly, NLP, I talked about it, right? Just more on, rather than adding more and more people to your teams, right? And kind of switching around your team skill sets, and like it or not, in 2 or 3 years, your job, my job, is going to be quite different with AI kind of embedding into our world, right? But really kind of switching their roles around, okay, less of data crunching and report preparation, but really kind of looking at data that serve to you, treat them as analysts, right? But unlimited resources, but you then use a lot of the brain power around deciding how you actually maneuver with your other business leaders in your company, right? Okay. So with that, yep, just some client names. EasyLink, they run their entire FP&A on Jedox, right? With the also merger with TransitLink as well. We also have Mantrack, which is a large manufacturing company, right? Being able to, instead of really cutting down their manual effort, right? But also circulating revisions of business performance to their senior leaderships, for example, and out of 3,000 customers, these are only 3 of them, and then Mitsui Chemicals really using us, fine-tuning our AI engine and use drivers that actually drive the revenue and forecast and kind of predict that into the future, right? So instead of based on humans to do that rolling forecast, we give them the first cut of it, they fine-tune the drivers, that eventually helps them to adjust it and kind of predict the sales forecast as accurate as possible, which then affects your revenue, that affects your cash flow as well, right? With that, we are the top right quadrant in Gartner, which means we are the top 5 players in our space. We are a profitable business. We have about 3,000 customers. We continue to add and innovate to bring more and more values to you, from an FP&A reporting, planning, and FinCon space, right? So yeah, happy to talk to you about kind of how we can help you in your organization together with the Grant Thornton team, right? With that, thank you. I'll leave this slide as the last slide to pause here for a while, and maybe I'll look at any questions that potentially been raised.
Yeah, thanks, CS, for the insightful presentation. So we do have 2 questions. So the first one is, the first question asks that if Jedox platform can link directly with ChatGPT.
Yes, that's correct. Today we have integrated with ChatGPT. You do have to sign up for your own account. We call it ChatGPT Enterprise. So for example, you work for, I don't know, let's take for example, you look for Nike, for example, right? Nike signs up your own, you have a ChatGPT. Some of them deploy that in their organization so that they use it to analyze the documents and whatnot, and then we can connect that to your account in your Jedox environment, right?
Okay. But yes, you did mention that you'll be introducing something else soon as part
Correct.
of the presentation. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys are quite aware around the Microsoft space, right? Microsoft OpenAI is the one that is, I think, invested in ChatGPT, but as a whole, they are maturing their AI model, and that is going to be embedded within because Jedox, we host our environment in Microsoft Azure, so we're going to be embedded within your database itself. So you will not lose anything. So the kind of the analysis that you're doing in ChatGPT will then be done by open AI within Microsoft, and it kind of powers your own database, right?
All right. The next question asks that I have my ERP system and several operational system with my source data. Why do I need an EPM tool, and how can I bring data together?
Interesting question. So maybe I'll bring this slide up, right? So I think each platform has its own benefit, right? You buy a CRM for your CRM purposes. You buy your ERP for order to cash and some sort of giving you a financial statement, giving you more operational finance report and how you're performing from an invoicing perspective, days outstanding perspective, and one-on-one, right? EPM for us, there are two things that's important. One is it's not just reporting, but being able to do scenario planning, budgeting, forecasting into the future or into the year or into a rolling 3 or 5 months, right? That's typically quite difficult to do in ERP. ERP is typically taking you in maybe budget by account code and by cost center maybe, right? Or by department versus, hey, I want to start a new product line or I want to do a merger with another company. What does it mean for my HR and sales and for example? So that planning part is more an EPM space, right? Not so much a reporting or operational reporting. And then secondly, I think the second question was around integration of data. So so for us, we differentiate from the other players in the market because the German is quite practical. One of the problems around data is they're all sitting everywhere. So inside Jedox, we have an integrator, which means you can configure, with the link and the username, password, we can connect to your SAP HANA, for example, and then we can extract data out into Jedox, right? So and that doesn't stop with ERP, but CRM and Workday HR, for example, and whatnot. So we can actually bring those data in. And then that again, back to your question, it then surpasses what ERP has, right? Because you're now bringing data from a customer to ERP to maybe production line, for example, so you have a more integrated reporting and planning, right?
Right. So the next question is, how would EPM shape the future finance function? And with so much hype around AI, what roles would you think human finance professionals would have?
I always think that maybe in future when our roles, when we put up job scope to hire people, will be quite different now. Because we used to say that you need Microsoft Excel skills, right? You need to be able to do I don't know, VLOOKUP or VBA or whatnot, for example. So I think that part of the job scope will change. I think organizations like my wife is also in finance. There's a lot of kind of shared service thinking around more processing and accounting. And then I think you guys, earlier speakers were talking around kind of RPA and automation to process that so that you get that done in a more centralized, harmonized way and, powered by, what they call robotic processing. But then local finance that's close to the business and HQ level, a lot of the movement will be more towards then FP&A around what do we do in our business, how should we model it, what do we need to do, right? Because I do see less and less now, I would say 50% of the clients I come across still have a finance manager doing both FP&A as well as accounting. And then that roles, I see that's going to continue to split because AI and automation is going to be very focused on these topics to help these two roles get better and better. Yeah, that's my kind of initial thoughts. Yeah.
And I think the last question we have in the chat box would probably resonate with a lot of people. So the user has mentioned that I do a lot of my budgeting in Excel today. So how do I start my EPM journey? So I think that's probably going to be a very common problem, and it's going to resonate with a lot of people on the in the audience.
I think start small. Don't go big bang. Don't try to do everything at one go. Because the longer the project, the higher it costs, the higher risk of it failing and whatnot. We do have a bunch of accelerators. So if you kind of have today's Excel, you probably want to look at starting with balance sheet, cash flow and P&L first, right? And then with that, you get that planning, budgeting, forecasting sort of from a top level, and then but with this thinking around what does top down and bottoms up mean to you, right? And with these two, I think that's where you probably start, right? We have a couple of ways to help you start. One is you have the accelerators, which are very easy to start. Some projects go live like 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Some goes about 3 months, but hardly our projects go beyond 6 months, right? Which is great because then you want to see the results. So else, some of the longer projects you might get fatigue from, ERP fatigue, for example. After ERP goes like 6 months, 12 months, you don't feel like doing anything else, right? So start small. We have accelerators to help you. We also have what we call data-driven modeling, which is taking your Excel file, whatever Excel file you have, you give it to us, we load into Jedox, becomes a cube, and then you can start planning from it already. So in short, start with a specific scope with the idea of expansion wider. Two, if you got any Excel files, we can convert them to Jedox model quite quickly. And then three, just more on maybe more from finance perspective, and then with the idea of scaling out to other parts of the businesses. Yeah, so that's my kind of thoughts around this. Yeah.
That's quite helpful. So I guess before we close, we have one last poll. So maybe my team can launch the poll. It's just a quick poll on where, and please answer based on where you are on your finance transformation journey, and just want to understand where you are and how does the content that has been shared resonate with you. Right. So I think it's a fairly mixed audience. Some people have already embarked upon that journey, but I see majority have either not started or hope to start that journey in the next 12 months. So yeah, I think that's hopefully this session has been insightful for you in terms of what you can do and what the whole finance transformation process looks like, and what are some of the experiences from industry, and obviously what CS has shared, the platform that Jedox or the functions that Jedox brings, and how it can help you in the EPM side of things. So with this, maybe we'll close the session, conclude today's session, and you have our contact details. So if you have any questions, queries, please feel free to reach out to us. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.